It didn't start with a bold kiss or an obvious gesture. It began in small, quiet moments. A touch here, a glance there, a conversation that lingered a bit too long. They would sit side by side on the couch after dinner, their legs brushing, their hands accidentally touching as they reached for the same glass. These were the moments that started it all, small sparks that would later ignite into something far more dangerous. For Charlotte, the attraction was undeniable. Her loneliness was fading, replaced by the attention of a man who saw her, who made her feel special. He was charismatic, charming, a reflection of everything she had longed for in a man. As their emotional connection deepened, so did their physical attraction. It wasn't long before the first stolen kiss happened, soft, hesitant at first, but full of longing. It wasn't just a kiss, it was the beginning of something dangerous. A quiet, secret affair that was just as much about their emotional connection as it was about the physical pull between them. What would drive a devoted wife and mother to commit such a shocking act of revenge? In the quiet town of Jefferson, Texas, a place where faith is woven into the very fabric of the community, lives a woman named Marissa Johnson. Known as a pillar of strength, a woman who preaches love, compassion, and forgiveness at the pulpit of her church, Marissa was more than just a wife. She was the heartbeat of her family. But what happens when that trust is shattered? When everything you've known, everything you've given your heart to, is ripped away in an instant? Marissa's life, filled with routine and prayer, suddenly collided with a cold, cruel truth that no one, especially her, could have foreseen. In the heart of Texas, behind the closed doors of a church, something darker was lurking, something no one had imagined. A betrayal so deep, so close to home, that it shattered everything Marissa held dear. It wasn't just the betrayal of a husband, but of something much more profound. It was the betrayal between mother and daughter. A mother who was supposed to be her guide, her protector, who had always been by her side, had turned her back on everything they stood for. And the man Marissa had loved, trusted, and built a life with? He was the one who betrayed her trust in the most unimaginable way. At first, it seemed like a typical family secret. Hidden glances, hushed voices, moments that didn't quite add up. But when the truth finally came crashing down, it left nothing in its wake but destruction. And Marissa, her heart torn between anger, sorrow, and a thirst for justice, made a choice that no one could have predicted. What would you do if you found out the man you married, the man you had given everything to, was not only unfaithful, but had found solace in the arms of the very woman who gave you life? This wasn't just a tale of infidelity. This was a story about revenge. A violent act, driven by raw emotion, that no one saw coming. But as we take a closer look at Marissa's journey, you'll realize it's not just the violence that will leave you stunned, but the devastating choices she made, fueled by years of love, hurt, and ultimately, betrayal. Stick around. As we unravel the shocking twists of a Texas pastor's world, we will explore how a once peaceful home turned into a battlefield of love, betrayal, and vengeance. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, share it, and follow this channel. You won't want to miss the next part of this gripping story. Turn on your notifications so you can catch every moment of this wild ride. In the heart of Jefferson, Texas, there was a woman everyone turned to when they needed guidance. Her name was Marissa Johnson, and she was more than just a pastor of a local church. She was a pillar of the community, a woman whose unwavering faith had led her through life's toughest battles. Her voice echoed through the walls of the church on Sundays, offering solace, comfort, and wisdom to anyone who needed it. But behind those words, behind her comforting smile, was a woman who gave every ounce of herself to those she loved. Marissa's life had always been about balance, faith, family, service. She had built a life around these three things, pouring her heart into her marriage with William Johnson, her husband, the man she believed to be her soulmate. Their bond to Marissa was sacred, a partnership formed in love, trust, and mutual respect. They were a team. He was her rock, her partner in both faith and life. William was everything a woman like Marissa needed, strong, reliable, and deeply supportive. He had a way with words, a natural charisma that made everyone feel heard and valued. To the outside world, their marriage was the epitome of harmony. But in the quiet corners of their home, things weren't always as perfect as they seemed. Marissa loved her husband deeply, and she had always believed in the vows they made, through good times and bad, sickness and health, richer or poorer. She was a woman who gave everything to her family. Her home was always filled with warmth. Her kitchen always smelled of something delicious, and her arms were always open to anyone who needed her. But in the quiet moments, when the church lights were dimmed and the evening prayers had been said, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. William had grown distant in recent months. He was always working late, always distracted. Their conversations seemed shorter, their laughter less frequent. She tried to brush it off, but there was a nagging feeling in her heart she couldn't ignore. And then there was her mother, Charlotte, a woman who had always been there for her, or so Marissa thought. Charlotte had been a constant presence in her life, but over the last year, she had become more involved with Marissa's family, often dropping by unannounced, offering to help, and spending time with William. It wasn't that Marissa minded, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. Charlotte was always friendly, but there was a noticeable shift in her behavior. She seemed to seek William's attention a little too eagerly, her eyes lingering a little too long when he spoke. Marissa brushed it off as nothing, just her mother being her mother, trying to be involved. But now, in hindsight, she saw the subtle signs she had missed. William was everything Marissa had dreamed of. At least, that's how it seemed. He was a man of charm, a natural talker who knew how to make people feel special. But the man she had married wasn't as perfect as he appeared. William had a past that was littered with failed relationships, bad choices, and dark secrets. Before meeting Marissa, his life had been a series of fleeting passions and uncommitted loves. He was no stranger to betrayal himself, having broken hearts just as easily as he had won them. But when he met Marissa, something about her had made him want to change, or at least, that's what he told her. She believed him. His promises of redemption, his vows to be a better man for her, made her heart swell with hope. He was the man she had prayed for. He was the perfect husband, the man who had somehow, against all odds, found his way to the right path. But as time wore on, his hidden flaws started to show. William was a master manipulator. His words were like honey, sweet and soothing, drawing Marissa closer. He made her believe in the future they were building together. But the truth was, he hadn't really changed. His charm was just another mask, one that hid the darker side of him, the part that still craved excitement, risk, and the thrill of the forbidden. He had a history of betrayal, and the affair that would tear his marriage apart wasn't a surprising one. It was just another chapter in his long list of broken promises. And then there was Charlotte, Marissa's mother, a woman whose life had been marked by loss. After her divorce years ago, she had been left to pick up the pieces of her own broken heart. Lonely, desperate for companionship, and increasingly isolated from the world, Charlotte had turned to her daughter for comfort. She had always been there for Marissa, but in recent years, she had become more of a burden, her loneliness spilling over into every conversation, every visit. It was easy to feel sorry for Charlotte, a woman who had spent much of her life chasing love only to find herself alone. But the sympathy Marissa had for her mother also made her vulnerable to what happened next. Charlotte had made mistakes in her youth, wild decisions that had led her down dangerous paths, and now, in her older age, she found herself in a position where her desperation for affection clouded her judgment. What began as an innocent, friendly connection with her son-in-law quickly turned into something more. A moment of shared vulnerability led to late-night talks that crossed lines. They had both been craving something. Charlotte, the attention she'd been missing for so long. William, the excitement of an illicit affair. And before either of them realized it, they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Charlotte never meant for it to happen, but she couldn't stop herself. In a strange way, she saw William as a man who could give her the affection she had missed for so long. He was kind, attentive, and made her feel alive again, things she hadn't felt in years. But as the bond between them deepened, So did the betrayal that would tear apart everything. The emotions in this family were thick, with love, longing, and bitterness intertwining. As the affair quietly continued, the cracks in Marissa's seemingly perfect world deepened. Little did she know, the walls she had so carefully built would soon come crashing down around her. As you've taken the story so far, ask yourself, how well do you really know the people closest to you? Could something like this ever happen in your life? Share this video with someone who might want to hear this cautionary tale, and make sure to like this video, comment, and follow our channel to stay updated with this shocking story. As time went on, Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was subtle at first, small, insignificant moments that didn't add up. She had always trusted her instincts, and they were telling her that something was wrong. But she couldn't place it. She noticed it at family gatherings, where her husband, William, seemed to act a little differently around her mother, Charlotte. At first, it was just a small thing, a lingering gaze, a slight touch on the shoulder that might have been nothing. But then, there were more. The way he laughed a little too loudly at her mother's jokes, or how he would go out of his way to help her with tasks that didn't need his help. Marissa brushed it off, telling herself she was just being paranoid. But when she caught Charlotte looking at William with a softness in her eyes, something stirred inside of her. It wasn't just the normal look of a mother admiring her daughter's husband. It was something more. Something that felt too intimate. A moment that lasted a second too long. At first, Marissa tried to dismiss the unsettling thoughts that crept into her mind. Maybe she was just imagining things, she thought. After all, Charlotte was a mother who had always been close to her, and William was just a charming man, the type who made everyone feel important. But something was changing. It wasn't just the way they spoke to each other. It was how they spoke around her, almost as if they were having a secret conversation that only they understood. Marissa started to notice the small things. Charlotte's insistence on staying for dinner after she'd already offered to leave, William staying home on weekends when he usually liked to go fishing, spending hours in the living room with Charlotte, talking about nothing in particular. But what was odd was how they looked at each other. There was a tension building between them that Marissa couldn't explain. She started questioning the times when she had been out running errands, only to return to find them still sitting together, heads leaning toward each other, sharing private jokes that Marissa wasn't a part of. Marissa had never been one to question her husband's late nights. After all, he was a businessman, constantly in and out of meetings. But it was the frequency of these absences that started to stand out. William would say he had a late-night meeting or an urgent work call, but when she asked, his explanations felt evasive. His responses didn't make sense, too vague, too rushed. Why was it that every time he was late, Charlotte was there to fill in for him? At first, Marissa thought she was just being overly sensitive, too caught up in the little things. But deep down, something didn't sit right with her. Why was Charlotte always there at the exact time William was gone? She couldn't place it, but the unease grew. The moments between William and Charlotte grew more charged as time went on. What started as subtle, seemingly innocent exchanges began to evolve into something more intimate. At first, it was just a shared memory of old times, of things they had experienced before Marissa even came into the picture. But with each passing day, these innocent conversations turned into confessions, moments of vulnerability, and shared silences that only they could understand. Charlotte, once a lonely, emotional woman who found comfort in her daughter, now found herself confiding in William more than she ever had in anyone. Grief, loss, and isolation made them connect on a deeper level, a level that was beyond familial love. They found themselves in each other's presence more and more, their words soft, their voices lowering in secrecy. The air between them seemed to hum with a quiet tension. The chemistry was undeniable, and the more they spent time together, the more it became clear that this wasn't just a friendship between a mother-in-law and son-in-law. It was something else entirely. It didn't start with a bold kiss or an obvious gesture. It began in small, quiet moments. A touch here, a glance there, a conversation that lingered a bit too long. They would sit side by side on the couch after dinner, their legs brushing, their hands accidentally touching as they reached for the same glass. These were the moments that started it all, small sparks that would later ignite into something far more dangerous. William would sit just a little too close to Charlotte, his fingers brushing her hand as they passed the salt. The look in his eyes when she smiled at him lingered just a fraction longer than it should. He had been so attentive, so kind, more than he ever had been to Marissa in the past few months. Charlotte had never been this seen, this wanted, and in the warmth of William's attention, she found herself craving something more. He made her feel noticed again, alive again. For Charlotte, the attraction was undeniable. Her loneliness was fading, replaced by the attention of a man who saw her, who made her feel special. He was charismatic, charming, a reflection of everything she had longed for in a man. As their emotional connection deepened, so did their physical attraction. It wasn't long before the first stolen kiss happened, soft, hesitant at first, but full of longing. It wasn't just a kiss, it was the beginning of something dangerous. A quiet, secret affair that was just as much about their emotional connection as it was about the physical pull between them. The deeper this affair grows, the more tangled their emotions become. Can you imagine the kind of betrayal Marissa is about to face? How would you feel if your loved ones, your closest family, betrayed you like this? What would you do in her shoes? Like this video, share, and follow if you're following this shocking story so far. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss the next shocking story. It had been building for weeks, the subtle signs, the strange behavior, the lingering glances, but Marissa had still refused to believe it. She had tried so hard to ignore the feeling in her gut, the suspicion that gnawed at her in the quiet moments of the night. But that day, the day everything would change, she could no longer pretend. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of warm, peaceful day where everything should have felt normal. Marissa had just finished her sermon and had come home, hoping for a quiet evening with William and Charlotte. But as she walked through the front door, something felt wrong. She could hear voices in the living room. At first, she thought nothing of it. Perhaps Charlotte was over again, helping with something or chatting with William. It had happened so many times before. But this time, there was something about the tone of their voices that struck her as different. As Marissa walked closer to the living room, the conversation became clearer. At first, it was muffled, but then a word caught her attention. One word that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was her mother's voice. "I never thought I would feel this way again, not after all these years." Marissa froze. Charlotte, her mother, sounded vulnerable, almost giddy. There was a hesitation in her voice, something she had never heard before. And William, he was speaking in a low, soothing tone, the kind of voice that always calmed her in the past. But now, hearing him speak like that to her mother, it felt off. Curiosity and dread mixed in her chest as Marissa moved closer. She didn't know why she did it. Perhaps it was intuition, or maybe it was just the need to understand what was happening. But with each step, the unease in her heart grew. As she peeked around the corner, she saw them. William and Charlotte, sitting close together on the couch, their heads leaning toward one another, their voices barely audible, but the tension in the air was undeniable. And there it was. A look in Charlotte's eyes, the kind of look a woman gives a man when she's not just interested, but enthralled. A look that Marissa had never seen before in her mother's eyes. William's hand rested on Charlotte's knee, a gesture that, in any other context, would have seemed like a casual touch. But the way Charlotte responded, how she turned toward him and leaned in, was enough to make Marissa's heart stop. This wasn't just a family conversation. This wasn't just two people talking. This was a betrayal. Everything slowed down in that moment. Marissa felt as if the world had suddenly gone quiet, the only sound she could hear being the rapid beat of her own heart. She had seen enough. The weight of the truth hit her like a freight train. William turned slightly, and for just a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Marissa froze. There was no apology, no sign of guilt. His face betrayed nothing. In that brief, silent moment he knew. He knew she had seen it. But the worst part wasn't just seeing them together. It was the realization that it had been happening for so long. Her mind raced back to all the quiet moments, all the strange absences, all the little clues she had ignored. It had been right in front of her the entire time. Her own mother, the one person she trusted more than anyone. And William, the man she had given her heart to. Marissa stepped back, retreating to the hallway. She needed space. She needed air. Her hands trembled as she placed them on her head, trying to stop the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to tear her apart. Faith. How could this happen? As a woman of faith, she had believed in love, in loyalty, in trust. Her entire life had been built around these values. And now, those values had been shattered. She had poured everything into her marriage. Everything. She had worked hard to build a life with William, to trust him, to believe in him. How could he do this? How could he betray her with her own mother? Her faith had always been strong, but in that moment, it felt as though it had been ripped out from under her. Was there no justice in the world? Could she ever believe in love again? And Charlotte, her own mother, the woman who had been her protector, her guide. How could Charlotte do this to her? She wasn't just betraying her daughter. She was betraying the very foundation of everything they had built as a family. Marissa's mind raced, thoughts spinning faster than she could keep up with. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of confusion and rage. How could they? How could they do this to me? After everything we've built together, this is how they repay me. Her voice broke as the weight of it all sank in. She had trusted them. She had trusted her mother. She had trusted William. And now they had ripped everything apart. Faith? It no longer felt like a comfort. Family? It felt like a lie. Her stomach churned. And for a moment, all she could do was breathe heavily, deeply, trying to find some sort of footing in a world that had just been turned upside down. How could she do this to me? Marissa thought about Charlotte, about her own flesh and blood, the woman who had always been there. How could she betray me like this? She was supposed to be my rock, my guide. Her heart broke for the life she had lost, for the man she had loved, the mother she had adored, and the future that was now lost. It was all a lie. The devastation Marissa feels is unimaginable. Can you understand her pain? Imagine what it must feel like to realize that the people closest to you have betrayed you in the worst way. What would you do if you were in Marissa's shoes? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you try to make sense of it all like she did? Like this video, share, and follow this story as it unfolds. You don't want to miss what happens next. Turn on your notifications and stay tuned for the next chapter in this shocking tale. The pain of betrayal cuts deeper than anything Marissa had ever known. Her mind races with the same unbearable thought over and over again. How could they do this to me? William, the man she had built her life with, the man who had promised her forever, wasn't just unfaithful. He had torn apart everything she had believed in. Every moment she had spent loving him, trusting him, had been a lie. And her mother, the woman who had raised her, who she had always looked up to, had shattered that trust in the most unimaginable way. As the anger and hurt began to fester, something inside Marissa snapped. The love she once felt for William felt like a distant memory, a dream that had now become a cruel joke. The woman she had loved, the mother she had adored, had betrayed her in the most intimate and destructive way possible. How could she ever look them in the eyes again? She had spent days crying, wondering how her life had turned into this. Her faith had been shattered, her world torn apart. The comforting thoughts of faith, the sense of peace she used to have, they were gone. All she had now was a burning rage. And with that rage came an overwhelming desire for revenge. Marissa hadn't known what to do at first. She had tried to reason with herself, tried to convince herself that she could let it go, that maybe she could forgive him. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. They had broken her. The quiet moments in the days that followed were the hardest for Marissa. She spent hours walking around the house, picking up things they had both touched, sitting in the places they had shared memories together. It was like she was suffocating in the silence of the life she thought she had. Each step she took felt heavier, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. Her thoughts swirled. How could she let them get away with this? The anger was growing, slowly, quietly, like a fire that started with a small spark but was now raging out of control. Her love for William, her once beloved husband, clashed violently with her rage, And for the first time, she felt the truth of her situation. She was broken. Why should I forgive them? She thought. Why should I let them get away with destroying everything we had? There was no answer to that question. There was only the desire to make them feel the same pain she was feeling. She wasn't thinking clearly anymore. It wasn't just anger, it was grief, it was betrayal, it was the soul-crushing realization that everything she had believed in had been turned into dust. Marissa found herself sitting alone one night in the darkened living room, staring at the dim light from the street outside. It was quiet, too quiet. The house was empty, William was out, and Charlotte hadn't come by for a while. There was nothing left but the thoughts that twisted around her mind like vines. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking. The betrayal, the pain had built up to this moment, and now she could feel something inside her change. Her thoughts became sharper. She had a plan. She began pacing the room, her mind racing as her fingers clenched into fists. "I've been a fool," she whispered to herself. "They think they can get away with this. But I will make them feel what I feel." Her gaze fell on the drawer where they kept the scissors, those sharp, cold instruments that had been a part of her life for years, used for simple tasks around the house. But tonight, in her hands, they were something far more dangerous. Her breath hitched as she stared at them, the anger surging through her body, and for the first time, it felt good. For a moment, she hesitated. The woman she once was, the woman who had preached forgiveness, the woman who had believed in God's grace, she was still in there, somewhere. And she didn't want to destroy herself by going down this path. But then the thought of William's face, the thought of Charlotte's eyes, and the unbearable pain they had caused her swept over her again, and the hesitation melted away. The anger was too strong, the betrayal too deep. They deserve this, she told herself. And, in that moment, she made the decision. Every moment she spends thinking about her next move, her anger grows, until it's all-consuming. She's not just angry, she's been broken. Marissa stood up, her legs weak but determined. She walked toward the door, her fingers tightening around the scissors. She didn't need to plan anymore. There was nothing to think about. She was past the point of reason. This wasn't about justice. It wasn't about what was right. It was about making them understand the weight of what they had done. Her pulse raced as she moved through the house, silently, knowing that the moment was coming, the moment that would change everything. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a woman who had been torn apart by the people she trusted most. And now they would feel that pain. Could you understand Marissa's pain? How far would you go if you were betrayed by those closest to you? What would you do when the hurt becomes too much to bear? Like this vid, share, and follow if you're feeling the weight of this moment. Stay with us as we continue this shocking tale. You won't believe what happens next. It was the sound of footsteps, the slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the stillness of the house. Marissa moved with purpose, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands steady as she gripped the scissors. The plan had been set in motion. There was no turning back now. Her world had been shattered. And now, she would make them feel the pain she had carried for days, weeks, months. She wouldn't just be the woman they betrayed. She would be the woman who decided that the destruction they caused would have a price. The house was eerily silent. William had just returned, tired and disoriented from a long day. He had no idea what was coming. Charlotte was nowhere in sight. Marissa knew she had her chance, and this moment of reckoning, was finally upon her. She stood at the top of the stairs, staring down at the man she had once called her husband, the man she had shared a bed with, a life with, a future with. The emotions surged again, the betrayal, the anger, the disbelief. The love she had felt for him now seemed like a memory from another life. Who was this man? The one who had destroyed everything. William entered the living room, glancing up and finally seeing Marissa. For a brief second, their eyes locked. His face froze in shock, his brow furrowing in confusion. He didn't see the scissors yet. But then he saw her stance, the anger in her eyes. And he finally knew. He knew. The reality of it hit him, crashing over him like a tidal wave. His face drained of color, and he took a step back, instinctively raising his hands in a futile attempt to protect himself. "Marissa, please, I didn't mean for it to go this far." His voice shook with panic, the words tumbling out in a desperate plea for mercy. I'm sorry. Please, just let me explain." But the words felt empty. Empty and useless. How could he explain something that could never be explained? How could he justify the destruction of a marriage, the betrayal of his wife and mother-in-law? How could he fix what he had broken? He started to take another step forward, as though he could somehow reach her, calm her, maybe beg for forgiveness. But Marissa stood still, her gaze unwavering. Every step he took toward her felt like 100 more, pushing her closer to the edge. Her fists clenched tighter, the scissors feeling heavier in her grip. With a swift, practiced motion, Marissa advanced toward him. Her breath caught in her throat, but her hand was steady. There was no more hesitation, no more internal struggle. There was only the feeling of betrayal, and the final, inevitable action that followed. In that moment, Marissa did what she had to do. She already cut his manhood. The air seemed to freeze around them, and time slowed down. For a split second, all that was left was the sound of their breathing, Marissa's rapid, harsh breaths, and William's labored, panicked ones. His eyes went wide, as the realization hit him all over again. It was too late. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words never came. He was frozen in disbelief, unable to move as Marissa took the scissors and made the final cut. It was done. Outside in the quiet of the night, Charlotte was just arriving, coming to check on Marissa, unaware of what was unfolding inside. As she opened the door, she paused, hearing the distant sounds of struggle, then the silence that followed. She walked cautiously into the house, her mind racing with confusion, until she saw William, crumpled on the floor, his body shaking, his face contorted in a mixture of pain and disbelief. His clothes were torn, his eyes wide with terror. And then her eyes shifted to Marissa, standing there, the scissors still in her hand, her expression unreadable. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined this. Her first instinct was to rush forward, to comfort William, to make sure he was okay. But as she moved toward him, she saw Marissa's face, cold, distant, yet filled with something that Charlotte hadn't seen before. A brokenness, a depth of pain, but also a quiet resolution. Charlotte's heart sank. She had helped bring this upon them. Her own flesh and blood had done the unthinkable. And though part of her wanted to be angry, to defend herself, there was another part, an overwhelming part, that felt something else. Regret. Regret for the choices she had made. Regret for the pain she had caused her daughter. But it was too late for regrets. The damage had been done. The betrayal was no longer just her own. It was shared now, between them all. The act has been done. But what happens now? What will Marissa do after taking this step? How does Charlotte come to terms with the destruction she helped create? And William, what is left for him now? Like this video, share, and follow to stay with us as we unravel the aftermath of this shocking act. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter, because the consequences are far from over. The immediate aftermath of the act was an overwhelming silence. Marissa stood still, staring at the wreckage she had created. The scissors, now discarded on the floor, gleamed in the dim light, a cold reminder of everything she had lost and everything she had just done. Her mind raced, her thoughts a tangled mess of guilt, anger, and confusion. Was this justified? Was this revenge? Or had she simply become the very thing she had once despised? Her hands trembled, still feeling the weight of the scissors she had used to cut the ties of betrayal. In that moment, the fury that had driven her to act began to fade, replaced by something more terrifying: doubt. The room was heavy with the quiet sound of William's ragged breaths as he lay on the floor, helpless. Her heart ached. Was this really the right choice? Was this really what she had wanted? She had wanted them to feel her pain, to understand the depth of the betrayal they had inflicted on her. But now, as the adrenaline started to wear off, the reality of what she had done began to settle in her bones. Marissa quickly found herself alone in the aftermath. William, who had barely managed to gather himself, was still lying on the floor, his eyes wide in shock. She couldn't look at him. Not yet. There was no remorse in her actions, but the weight of them was suffocating. But what now? What next? The silence in the house was deafening. Marissa felt a sinking pit in her stomach as she realized that nothing could ever be the same again. She had crossed a line, and now she had to face the consequences. Her life, her marriage, her community, everything was about to change. There was the legal aspect to consider. What would she tell the police when they arrived? Could this be seen as self-defense? Would the community understand? Or would they condemn her as a woman who had let her rage get the best of her? A woman who let revenge dictate her every move? The silence grew louder as the thoughts swirled in her head. She had acted on impulse, but now she had to face the reality of what that meant. She had taken something from William that could never be returned. His pride, his dignity. Would she ever get that back? The questions continued to haunt her. Would the community understand her actions? Marissa had always been seen as the strong, devoted pastor, an example of grace, of forgiveness. But could the community forgive what she had done? Some of the people who had always supported her might stand by her side, understanding the pain and betrayal she'd faced. But others would look at her as just another woman who had gone too far. A woman who allowed her anger to destroy everything. Charlotte, meanwhile, had vanished. After everything that had happened, she wasn't just physically absent. She was emotionally lost. She couldn't bring herself to face Marissa or anyone else. The guilt weighed her down like a ton of bricks. She had never imagined it would come to this. She had never imagined Marissa would take such a drastic step. But Charlotte had a part to play in this. She had been the catalyst, the one who had allowed her feelings of loneliness and desire to guide her into something that would forever destroy her daughter's world. Her regret was suffocating. But despite her regret, Charlotte couldn't bring herself to come forward, to admit the role she had played in this betrayal. The shame was too great. She couldn't face Marissa, couldn't bear to look her daughter in the eyes after everything that had transpired. Instead, she stayed away, isolated, removed, knowing full well that she had helped tear apart the life Marissa had built. And what of William? The man who had so brazenly betrayed his wife and mother-in-law, who had reveled in the secret, thinking he could hide his affair forever? Now, he was nothing more than a broken man. William survived the physical pain, though it would be a long and painful recovery. But the emotional scars? They were far deeper. He tried to hide it at first, tried to salvage what was left of his pride, but the humiliation he felt in the wake of what had happened was too much to bear. The public reaction was swift. The community was shocked, torn between those who understood Marissa's actions and those who condemned her for taking justice into her own hands. But for William, the humiliation was personal. His affair, his betrayal, was now on display for everyone to see. And what was worse, he had no one to blame but himself. He tried to reach out to Marissa, to beg for forgiveness, but she remained distant. Her silence was deafening, and he felt the weight of his guilt grow heavier with each passing day. But William didn't just face the emotional consequences. He now had to contend with the legal ramifications of his betrayal. Was what Marissa had done a crime? Could she claim self-defense? Or would the law see her as a woman who had acted out of rage and vengeance? In the end, William sought legal action. He had to, if only to try to maintain whatever dignity he had left. But even as he prepared for court, deep down, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. His actions had led them both here, to this point of destruction. What do you think? Was Marissa justified in her actions? Or did the weight of her revenge go too far? What would you do if you were in her shoes? And what about William? Can a man like him ever redeem himself after betraying those closest to him? Like, share, and follow to stay with us as this shocking story unfolds. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, because the consequences of this betrayal are far from over. The world outside had no mercy on Marissa. What had begun as a quiet betrayal in the confines of her home had erupted into something far more explosive, a public spectacle. As the news of the shocking act spread, the community was torn. The story of the Texas pastor who had taken justice into her own hands spread like wildfire. capturing the attention of both local and national media. News outlets were quick to pick up on the story, and what followed was a frenzy, a mixture of support and condemnation that divided the public into two camps. Some saw her as a woman pushed to the edge, a victim of unimaginable betrayal who had been forced to take matters into her own hands. They spoke of her years of service to the church, her devotion to family, and how the people closest to her had turned against her. For them, her actions were justified, a response born from heartbreak, anger, and frustration. She was fighting back, and in their eyes, she had every right to do so. But others, especially those who had always seen Marissa as the moral beacon of their community, could not fathom the violence of her revenge. For them, there was no excuse for what she had done, no justification for the brutal act that had left a man broken and a family torn apart. Some saw it as an act of cold, calculated violence that went too far, an irreversible mistake that had forever tainted her image and her mission. In the end, the courts had their say. The media continued to follow the case, documenting every twist and turn as the legal proceedings unfolded. Marissa stood before the judge, her face marked by the weight of her actions. She was no longer the woman the community had once seen. She was a woman whose choices had forever changed the course of her life. Was it self-defense? Could Marissa claim that the emotional pain, the betrayal, had driven her to act in a moment of uncontrollable rage? The defense argued that it was a crime of passion, an emotional breakdown that led to a moment of desperation. But the prosecution saw it differently. They saw a woman who had crossed a line, someone who had taken the law into her own hands, regardless of the consequences. The legal outcome, whatever it may be, couldn't erase the psychological toll on Marissa. She was left to face the personal consequences of her actions. Her faith in shambles, her family destroyed, and her reputation irrevocably damaged. Even if she was acquitted, could she ever forgive herself for what she had done? Could she find peace after all the devastation? As the case continues to unfold, one question lingers. Was Marissa's revenge truly justified? Was it an act of righteousness, or was it a loss of control that cost her everything? For some, revenge felt like a necessary act. An eye for an eye, a man who had destroyed her marriage, betrayed her trust, and desecrated her family's honor. For others, Marissa's actions were a tragic mistake, one that will haunt her forever, a reminder that sometimes even the strongest people can break under the weight of betrayal. And the biggest question remains, did Marissa's revenge set off a chain of events no one could have predicted? The ripples of her actions will reach far beyond her own life, beyond the walls of the courtroom. As the weeks go by, people in the community begin to reflect on what this story means for them, what it says about justice, family, and betrayal. Some wonder how they would act in her shoes, what they would do if their world had been destroyed by the ones they loved most. Could they have done what she did, or would they have walked away? The questions are endless. In the end, there is no simple answer. Some will always see Marissa as a woman who had no choice but to seek revenge. Others will see her as a woman who crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. What do you think? Was Marissa's revenge justified? Or did it cost her more than she could ever have imagined? Was there another way, or was she driven to this point beyond reason? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have done the same? If you found this story gripping, like this video, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more real-life crime stories. And don't forget to turn on notifications, because the next shocking tale could be just around the corner.